Welcome, and thank you for settling in tonight. There is nothing at all that needs your attention right now. Whatever happened today, whatever might happen tomorrow, none of it is here with you in this moment. Right now, there is only this quiet voice, and the slow rhythm of your own breathing, and the comfortable weight of wherever you are resting. You can let your body grow a little heavier. You can let your shoulders drop just slightly. You can let your eyes close, or let them grow soft and unfocused, and simply listen. Tonight, we are going to spend some time thinking about work. Not the work you do in your own life, not anything urgent or demanding, but the slow, repetitive, unremarkable work that ordinary people did throughout history. Every day, for centuries and centuries, people got up in the morning and went to do their jobs. Jobs that were often difficult, often unpleasant, often monotonous in ways that are hard to imagine from this distance. And they did those jobs quietly and steadily and without much drama. And then they went home and they slept and they got up and did it again. That is what we are going to explore tonight. Not great events, not battles or discoveries or famous moments, just work. The slow, daily texture of ordinary work in the past. The kind of work that most people who have ever lived spent most of their waking hours doing. We are going to move through it gently and without hurry, spending time with each kind of work, noticing the small details of it, letting it fill the imagination the way a quiet landscape fills the eye, slowly, without demand, without urgency. And if at any point tonight you find that you are drifting towards sleep, that the words are beginning to blur at the edges and your thoughts are loosening and the voice is becoming just a sound rather than a series of ideas, that is exactly right. That is exactly what is supposed to happen. You don't need to follow everything. You don't need to remember anything. You can just let it wash over you, slowly, like warm water, and drift. So let us begin. Let us go back, a very long way back, and spend some time with the people who did the work that kept the world running. Let us start with the medieval farmer, because the medieval farmer is perhaps the most common human being in all of history. For most of the Middle Ages, for most of the period from roughly the 5th century to the 15th, the vast majority of people in Europe were farmers. Not farmers in the modern sense, with machinery and fertilizers and carefully managed crop rotations, but farmers in the oldest sense, people who worked the land with their hands and their animals and very simple tools, who lived by what the earth gave them and suffered when it did not give enough. Imagine a man, let us call him simply the farmer, waking up before dawn on a grey morning in late autumn, somewhere in the English countryside, perhaps around the year 1200 or so. The house he wakes in is small and dark, a single room, low-ceilinged, the walls made of timber and packed mud and straw, the roof thatched with reeds that rustle very softly when the wind moves across them. The floor is earth, just the ground, packed hard by years of footsteps, covered here and there with old rushes and straw that has seen better days. The smell of the room is the smell of wood smoke and damp wool and the animals that live at the far end of the same building, separated from the sleeping area by a low wooden partition. He gets up slowly. His joints are stiff from the cold, from the hard sleeping surface, from the accumulated tiredness of many previous days of heavy work. He moves without hurrying, because there is no advantage in hurrying, because the fields will be exactly where he left them, regardless of when he arrives. He rebuilds the fire from the embers that survived the night, a careful, practiced process of blowing softly on the coals and adding small pieces of wood until the flame catches and grows. This takes a few minutes. He watches the fire while he waits for it to establish itself, not thinking much, just being present with the small growing warmth. His wife is up now, moving in the familiar rhythms of morning, ladling water from the bucket into the iron pot, measuring out grain for the morning pottage. The sound of water, the sound of the fire, the sound of the animals stirring at the other end of the house. These are the sounds of every morning. They change very little from one day to the next. The pottage is the same as it was yesterday and the day before that. Oats and water and salt, Sometimes a little dried pea or a piece of old vegetable, always the same deep grey bowl, always the same wooden spoon, always eaten standing near the fire in the dim morning light. Then the farmer goes to the field. He goes every day that the weather allows. He goes with his ox, a large, quiet animal that he has worked with for 3 years and that he knows almost as well as he knows his own children. The ox pulls the plough and the farmer guides it, walking behind, his hands on the handles, his weight leaning into the turns, his whole body engaged with the work in a way that is neither comfortable nor uncomfortable, simply physical, simply present. The soil of this field is heavy clay, and in the autumn wet, it clings to everything, to the plough blade, to the farmer's shoes, to the legs of the ox. He stops periodically to scrape the mud from the blade with a stick. He does this without frustration. It simply needs to be done, the way many things simply need to be done. The furrow goes down the length of the strip and back up again, down and back, down and back. The rhythm of it is slow and repetitive, and after an hour or two, it becomes almost meditative, the mind emptying out as the body settles into the work, the world narrowing to the plough and the soil and the sound of the ox's breathing and the soft, wet sound of the earth turning. The sky above is grey and low. There is the smell of turned earth, a rich, dark smell, and the smell of the ox, warm and animal, and the smell of the cold air coming off the nearby fields. These smells are not unpleasant. They are simply the smells of the work, the smells of the morning, the smells that this particular life is made of. At midday, or close to it, the farmer stops. He ties the ox to a stake and sits down on the cold ground at the edge of the field and eats the food he brought with him. Dark bread, dense and slightly sour, torn in pieces, a small amount of hard cheese, a flask of thin ale. He eats slowly, looking out over the field he has been working, over the dark turned soil and the grey sky and the bare trees at the edge of the common land. He is tired. He is always tired at midday. But the tiredness is not distressing. It is simply the condition of the afternoon, the weight of the morning carried forward into the remaining hours. The afternoon is more of what the morning was. Down the furrow and back, the light changing as the winter sun moves low across the sky, the shadows lengthening earlier than you might expect, the quality of the light shifting toward the yellow and gold of late afternoon. The other farmers in their own strips nearby, working in the same slow rhythm, the occasional low sound of a voice calling to an animal, the creak of another plough. This shared presence in the field is comfortable without requiring much acknowledgement. A nod, a brief word about the weather, then back to the work. When the light begins to fail, the farmer stops. He unharnesses the ox and leads it back toward the village, the plough over his shoulder, his feet finding the familiar path home without much guidance from his mind. The village is gathering itself in for the evening, smoke rising from the low houses, the sounds of animals being settled, the voices of children. He puts the ox away and checks on it, and then goes inside, and the fire is there, and the warmth is there, and the pottage is there again, and the children are there, and the day closes down around him gently, the way days have always closed down, into the warmth and the firelight and the slow drift towards sleep. This was the farmer's work, day after day, season after season, ploughing and planting and tending and harvesting and storing and beginning again. The same fields, the same soil, the same ox, the same slow rhythm of a life organized entirely around what the earth needed and what it gave in return. You can imagine settling into that rhythm, the repetition of it, the way one day follows another in an almost hypnotic sequence. Let us move now to a different kind of work, a different kind of person in a different place and time, doing work that was perhaps less obviously difficult, but no less constant in its demands. Let us think about the night soil collector. You can imagine a city, a large medieval city, perhaps in England or France or the Low Countries, somewhere around the 13th or 14th century. A city of several thousand people living in close quarters, their houses crowded together along narrow unpaved streets, their lives overlapping and interwoven in ways that both supported and complicated each other. Cities of this period did not have sewage systems in any meaningful sense. The waste produced by thousands of human bodies every day had to go somewhere, and where it went, for the most part, was into pits dug in the ground beneath outhouses, built in the yards behind the houses, or into wooden boxes called cesspits that sat beneath the floor of the latrine inside the house, or sometimes simply into the street. These pits and boxes filled up. Of course they did. They had to be emptied regularly, or life in the city would become rapidly untenable, and the people who emptied them were the night soil collectors. Men who came in the night when the rest of the city was sleeping and did the work that made urban life possible, while most of the urban residents preferred not to think too carefully about how it was accomplished. Imagine one of these men waking late in the evening when most of the city has already gone to bed. The streets are dark, lit only by the occasional torch above a doorway or the faint light of a moon that may or may not be present behind the clouds. He dresses in his working clothes, which are old and dark, and smell of what he does for a living, a smell that does not bother him anymore because he has worked with it long enough that it is simply the background smell of his own life. He meets the rest of his crew in the yard where the equipment is kept. The equipment is simple: buckets, large wooden barrels on a cart, long-handled scooping tools. The horse that pulls the cart, an older animal accustomed to the night work, standing quietly in the traces. They move through the dark streets quietly. The city at night is a different place from the city in the daytime. The sounds are different. Fewer voices, less movement. The sounds of animals in their stalls, the occasional distant sound of someone still awake. The streets smell of the city, of everything that thousands of people and animals produce in the course of a day, and the night soil collectors move through these smells without reaction, going about their work in the same methodical way that they always do. At each property on their route, they open the gate or the narrow passage that leads to the backyard, and they find the cesspit or the outhouse, and they begin the work of emptying it. The tools are used to scoop the contents into the buckets. The buckets are carried to the cart and emptied into the barrels, and the process continues until the pit is empty, or as close to empty as the tools and the buckets and the patience of the workers allow. The work is slow. It requires care and steadiness rather than speed. Moving too quickly spills things, creates more mess, makes the work harder. The experienced night soil collector has learned to move at exactly the right pace, methodical and unhurried, doing each thing in its proper order. When the barrels are full, the cart is driven out through one of the city gates, which are opened for this purpose in the night hours, and the contents are taken to the waste grounds outside the city walls, or to the fields of the farmers who want the material for fertilizing their crops. This was in fact a genuine economic transaction. The material in those barrels was valuable as fertilizer, and farmers would pay for it, which helped offset the cost of the collection service. The cart is emptied, the barrels are rinsed, and the crew returns to the city to continue with the remaining properties on the route. By the time the night soil collectors finish their work, the sky is beginning to lighten at the edges. The early risers of the city are beginning to stir, the bakers and the dairymaids and the farmers coming in from the surrounding countryside. The collectors return to their yard, clean their equipment as best they can, and then go home to sleep through the morning while the city wakes up around them and goes about its day in the clean, emptied streets, the work of the night already forgotten, the mechanism that makes the city function invisible, as it always is, to the people who simply live there. You can imagine the routine of it. The same streets, the same gates, the same slow, methodical work in the dark, night after night. The city sleeping around them, the work continuing, quiet and unglamorous and entirely necessary. Let us move gently to another kind of work, another person, another life. Let us think about the medieval servant, and particularly about the servant in a large household, perhaps in the house of a prosperous merchant or a minor noble, somewhere in England in the 14th century. The servant's day begins early, earlier than almost everyone else in the household, because the servant's purpose is to make things ready for the people they serve, and things must be ready before those people rise. Imagine waking in a small room at the back of a large house, a room shared with 2 or 3 other servants, a room that is cold and dark and furnished with almost nothing, a sleeping place, a hook on the wall for clothing, perhaps a small box for personal belongings. This is where the servant's private life, such as it is, exists. It is not much, but it is somewhere. The first task of the morning is the fires. The large house has multiple hearths, in the great hall, in the kitchen, perhaps in the master's private chamber and the mistress's solar, and all of them must be cleaned of the previous day's ash and relaid with fresh wood and kindled before the household rises. This is physical work, crouching and kneeling on cold stone floors, working with ash and wood in the dim light of a candle, moving from room to room with the carrying basket for the ash and the bundle of kindling. The servant knows the house the way they know their own body, knows which hearth draws well and which is temperamental, knows how much wood each fire needs for the morning, knows the particular character of each room in the early cold before the fires are lit. The kitchen comes next, or perhaps is happening at the same time, because the kitchen servant and the chamber servant are different people with different duties, and in a larger household there are many servants, each responsible for a specific domain. The kitchen fire must be going well in advance of breakfast, because the water for washing and the food for the morning meal both require heat, and heat requires time. The kitchen is a large and busy space when it is in full operation, full of the smells of food and fire and the sounds of activity. But at this early hour it is quiet, just the fire and the slow preparation of the morning, one person moving steadily through the familiar sequence of tasks. Water must be fetched. This is a task that falls to servants in every household that does not have the luxury of a well within the courtyard, and many do not. The servant takes the buckets and goes to the nearest public well or fountain and fills them and carries them back, and does this as many times as the household's needs require. Water is heavy. The buckets are wooden and the rope handles cut into the palms of the hands over the course of a morning's carrying. But this is simply part of the work. The hands know it. The body has adapted to it. It is neither remarkable nor anything to dwell on. Through the day, the servant's work is the continuous maintenance of the household, cleaning, laying tables, serving food and removing it, making beds, which are the beds of the people they serve, not their own, carrying messages, answering doors, helping the mistress dress, which involves an elaborate sequence of garments and lacings and pins that must be done correctly and quickly and without disturbing the mistress's conversation or her mood, running errands to the market or to other houses in the neighborhood. All of this is done quietly, efficiently, with a manner that is present without being intrusive, visible when needed, and invisible at all other times. The servant eats when there is time to eat, which is not always when they are hungry, and eats what is given, which is the food left over from the meals of the household, eaten in the kitchen or in the small servants' room off the main hall. It is not bad food. In a prosperous household, there is usually enough of it, but it is eaten quickly and without ceremony, fitted into the gaps between one task and the next, a functional activity rather than a pleasurable one. In the evening, after the household has dined and the hall has been cleared and the fires have been built up for the night and the master and mistress have retired, the servant's day begins to wind down. There are still things to do. The kitchen must be cleaned, the utensils put away, the fire in the kitchen damped down but not extinguished. The candles in the hall must be snuffed, the doors must be checked, and then, at last, the servant can go to the small cold room at the back of the house and take off their working clothes and lie down in their sleeping place and let the day release them. The days are very similar, one to the next. The rhythm of the household is constant and predictable, and within that rhythm the servant's tasks are constant and predictable too. Fires and water and cleaning and serving and clearing and checking and doing it all again tomorrow. You can imagine settling into that rhythm, the way familiarity with a task removes almost all of its difficulty, the way repetition becomes a kind of rest for the mind, even as the body keeps working. Let us move further back now, to an older world, to the world of Rome, perhaps in the 1st or 2nd century of the Common Era, when the Roman Empire was at its height and the city of Rome itself was the largest city in the Western world, home to perhaps 1 million people and the center of a civilization that stretched from Scotland to Syria. In this world, let us think about the work of a slave in a large Roman household. The Roman institution of slavery was vast and pervasive, touching almost every aspect of life, and the experience of enslaved people varied enormously depending on the household they were in and the work they were required to do. In a wealthy household, some enslaved workers had relatively tolerable lives, skilled work, regular food, a place to sleep, the possibility of eventually being freed. In harsher circumstances, the experience was much grimmer. Tonight, we are going to stay with the quieter end of that spectrum, with a domestic worker in a moderately prosperous Roman home, because that is the world we can describe most calmly and in the most detail. Imagine a large house in Rome, one of the grand private townhouses called a domus, built around a central courtyard with a small pool at its center for collecting rainwater. The rooms arranged around the courtyard in a sequence that moves from the public spaces near the entrance to the private family rooms at the back. The house smells of the oil burning in the lamps, and of the food being prepared in the small kitchen at the side, and of the herbs growing in pots in the courtyard. It is early morning, and the house is just beginning to stir. The slave who tends the household wakes in the small room at the back of the house where the domestic workers sleep. The room is small and functional, its walls plain plaster, its floor stone. Other workers sleep in the same room, and the mornings begin with the quiet movement of several people dressing and preparing in the same space, moving around each other with the practiced efficiency of people accustomed to limited space. The lamps must be trimmed and refilled first. Roman lamps burned olive oil, small clay vessels with a wick that produced a warm, steady light, but that required regular attention to keep burning well. The slave moves through the house in the early morning, tending to each lamp in turn, checking the oil level, trimming the wick if it has gotten too long, wiping the small ring of soot that collects around the wick hole. The house is quiet at this hour. The family is still sleeping. The only sounds are the birds in the garden at the back of the house and the distant sounds of the city beginning its day outside the walls. After the lamps, the sweeping. Roman houses were swept daily, the stone and tile floors cleaned of the dust and debris that accumulated from the previous day. The broom used for this is a bundle of stiff twigs bound together at one end, simple and effective, and the sweeping is done in a particular sequence, from the back rooms forward, driving the dust toward the entrance where it can be swept outside. The slave moves methodically through the rooms, the sound of the broom a soft, steady rhythm, the light of the morning growing gradually stronger through the windows as the sun continues to rise. Then the courtyard. The central pool must be checked, the plants in their pots attended to, the stone paving around the pool swept clean of leaves and any debris that has fallen in the night. The courtyard is the heart of the house, the place where the family spends time during the day, and it must always be orderly and pleasant. The slave knows exactly what is expected here. The same standard every morning, the same tasks in the same sequence, the same result that the family will see when they emerge from their sleeping rooms and take their morning meal in the courtyard. The morning meal in a Roman household is simple: bread, olives, perhaps some cheese or a little preserved fish. The slave prepares this and sets it out on the low table in the courtyard, arranging the items in the way the household prefers, making sure everything is there, stepping back and waiting in the quiet, attentive way that domestic workers learn to wait, present but unobtrusive, ready to respond to a request but not intruding on the family's morning. The rest of the day is the maintenance of the house and the service of the family's needs. Water to be fetched from the public fountain at the end of the street. Bread to be collected from the baker around the corner, because very few Roman households baked their own bread. Messages to be carried to other houses. Clothes to be washed at the public laundry. The Fulonica, where garments are soaked in large stone vats and worked with the feet. The work is continuous and varied, but follows a predictable pattern that the experienced domestic worker navigates without difficulty, each task known, each route familiar, each expectation understood. In the evening, when the family has eaten their main meal and the day's work has wound down, the lamps are trimmed again for the night and the slave returns to the small sleeping room. The day has been long, the work has been continuous, but it has been the work of every other day, predictable and familiar, and the body knows how to carry it and how to rest from it, and the sleep at the end of such a day is deep and immediate. You can feel the rhythm of it, perhaps, the sameness of one day following another, the way the familiar work fills the hours without drama, without excitement, just the steady, ongoing business of maintaining a life and a household and doing what needs to be done. Let us move now to a different kind of work entirely and a different kind of challenge. Let us think about the plague doctor, but gently, at a distance, focusing not on the suffering they witnessed, but on the routine of the work itself, the methodical and repetitive aspect of it, the daily practice of a person whose job was simply to keep going and do what they could in very difficult circumstances. The plague doctor in the medieval and early modern period, particularly those who worked in the cities of Italy and France in the 14th and 15th centuries, during the periods of plague that recurred after the Black Death of the mid-14th century, was a figure of considerable complexity. They were employed by city governments to attend to plague patients, to visit the sick and assess their condition and provide what treatment was available, which was not much. In return, they received a salary from the city, which was an unusual arrangement for the time and reflected how difficult it was to find physicians willing to do this work. The distinctive costume of the plague doctor is probably familiar to you, the long dark robe and the beak-shaped mask filled with aromatic herbs and spices. The mask was a practical device based on the miasma theory of disease, the belief that plague was carried in bad-smelling air and that sweet-smelling substances would counteract it. The theory was wrong, but the mask was worn consistently because the doctors believed it, and because even a wrong theory can be comforting when you are engaged in frightening work. Imagine a plague doctor beginning his rounds in a city, perhaps Florence or Venice, somewhere in the 15th century, during one of the recurrent waves of plague that continued to visit Italian cities long after the initial catastrophe of the Black Death. The morning is quiet. The streets are less busy than they would normally be, because when plague is present in a city, those who can afford to leave have left, and those who remain move through the streets with the particular careful bearing of people trying to avoid contact with others. The doctor dresses in his protective clothing carefully and methodically, the long waxed robe, the gloves, the hat, the beak mask, which he fills with fresh herbs each morning, dried lavender and juniper and rosemary, their sharp, clean smell filling the enclosed space of the mask with something that is at least preferable to the smells he will encounter in the houses he visits. He carries a long staff, used to examine patients without touching them directly, and a notebook for recording the cases he sees. His route is set out for him by the city authorities, a list of houses where sick people have been reported or where he left a patient the day before. He walks to the first house on his list. He knocks. The door is opened, sometimes quickly, sometimes after a long wait. He goes inside and he looks at the patient, and he notes what he sees, and he says what he can say, and he recommends what can be recommended. Rest, water, if the patient can take it, certain herbal preparations that were believed to help, whether they did or not. He writes in his notebook. He moves to the next house. This routine is repetitive and slow and requires a particular kind of steadiness. The doctor cannot hurry. There is no advantage in hurrying. He can see as many patients as his route takes him to, and each visit takes as long as it takes, and the work is done in the same methodical way, regardless of what he finds. He has learned to be present with what he finds without being overwhelmed by it, because being overwhelmed would make him useless, and being useful, however modestly useful, is the reason he is here. At the end of his rounds, which might take most of the day, he returns to his own house or to the building the city has provided for his accommodation, and he removes his protective clothing and washes his hands and his face, and he records the day's visits in his ledger for the city authorities, and he eats whatever meal is available, and he rests. Tomorrow the route will be similar. Some of the patients he saw today will be better. Some will not. Some will be gone from the list, and new ones will have been added. The work continues. You can imagine the kind of concentration this required. Not dramatic or intense concentration, but quiet, sustained, methodical attention. The way a person learns to do difficult work by simply continuing to do it, one step at a time, one house at a time, one day at a time. Let us move to another kind of work now, and let us visit a castle. Not the gleaming fairy tale castle of romantic imagination, but a real medieval castle, a working fortification that is also a home and an administrative center and a community unto itself. And within that castle, let us spend some time with one of the humblest workers, the person who tends the fire. In a large medieval castle, keeping the fires going was a significant enterprise. The castle had many hearths, in the great hall where everyone ate, in the kitchens where the food was prepared, in the lord's private chambers and the lady's solar, in the guardrooms and the gatehouse. All of these fires needed to be laid and kindled and tended and rebuilt day after day, and someone had to do it. The fire tender's work began before dawn, because the kitchen fires needed to be burning well before the first meal of the day could be prepared, and the kitchen fires in a castle kitchen were large and demanding. Imagine this person making their way through the cold stone corridors of the castle in the very early morning, carrying their tools, moving from hearth to hearth in the sequence they have learned and followed every working day. Each fire is approached in the same way. First, the ash from the previous day is raked out and collected in a metal pan to be taken away later. The fireplace is checked for any problems. Fresh wood is laid in the correct arrangement, larger logs at the back and sides, smaller pieces in front, kindling at the front, all arranged to give the fire the best chance of catching quickly and burning evenly. The kindling is lit, and the fire tender kneels in front of the hearth and blows gently and steadily until the kindling has caught the smaller pieces, and the smaller pieces have caught the larger ones, and the fire is established and will continue on its own without further attention for some time. Then on to the next hearth. The same process. Rake the ash, check the fireplace, lay the wood, light the kindling, blow, wait, watch, move on. The stone corridors of the castle are cold in the morning. The stone holds the cold the way stone always does, radiating it back into the air long after the temperatures outside have risen. The fire tender's breath is visible in the cold air. The sounds of the castle in the early morning are few and distant. The creak of a door somewhere, the sound of the night watch coming to the end of their shift, the first sounds of the kitchen beginning its work once the fires are burning. The middle part of the day brings different firework, not the initial kindling, but the ongoing maintenance, the periodic addition of wood to keep the fires at the right level, the checking that nothing is burning in a way it shouldn't, the careful management of the kitchen fire, which must be hotter for roasting than for simmering, and must be adjusted accordingly. This requires a kind of constant, low-level attention, moving through the castle at intervals through the day, checking each hearth, adding wood or adjusting it, noting what is needed before it becomes urgent. The Great Hall fire is the most important and the most demanding. This fire burns all day and often into the night, providing warmth for the many people who eat and work and move through the hall. It must be kept large and steady, fed with significant quantities of wood, and the wood must be brought from the wood store, and the ash must be taken away, and the whole cycle must continue without interruption. The fire tender spends more time at the Great Hall fire than at any other hearth in the castle, returning to it often through the day, adding wood in the careful way that keeps a large fire burning evenly, rather than roaring and then dying, maintaining the steady warmth that the hall requires. By evening, the work changes again. The bedchamber fires must be kindled for the night, smaller and more intimate than the Great Hall fire, laid to burn slowly through the night and still be warm in the morning. The kitchen fire must be damped down to a level that will hold through until the early morning without requiring attendance, but will still be alive enough to be built up again without difficulty. Each hearth is attended to one last time in the sequence. And then the fire tender's day is done. You can imagine the warmth of it, moving from hearth to hearth through the cold stone castle. Each fire a small center of warmth and light. The smell of wood smoke, a constant companion through the day. The work slow and repetitive and never quite finished. Always another fire waiting. And now let us visit one more kind of work, a kind that takes us back to the outdoor world, to the slow work of the land. Let us think about the shepherd, who is in many ways the loneliest of all the medieval workers, and the one whose work has perhaps the most of what we are looking for tonight. The slow, repetitive, meditative quality of work that requires presence without demanding thought. The shepherd's job is to follow the sheep. That is, at its simplest, what it amounts to go where the flock goes, to stay with them through the day as they graze across the common land and the hillsides, to keep them together and keep them safe, and at the end of the day, to bring them back to the fold. This is the work of every day, in every season, even in winter, when the grazing is poor and the flock is smaller and the days are short. The shepherd goes out with the animals and stays with them until it is time to come back. Imagine a shepherd on a hillside in late summer. The flock spread out across a wide stretch of grassland, the sheep moving slowly from one patch of grass to the next, their heads down, the sound of their grazing a low, continuous, very quiet sound that is almost like the sound of the grass itself. The shepherd sits on a stone at the edge of the flock, not doing much, just being present, watching without anxiety, his eyes moving slowly across the group of animals, the way a calm mind moves across a familiar landscape. The shepherd's dog lies nearby, also watching, its attention slightly sharper than the shepherd's, tuned to the small signals that mean something in the flock needs attention. But for now, there is nothing that needs attention. The flock is calm, the day is warm, the grass is good. The shepherd and the dog and the flock exist together in a slow and peaceful equilibrium that requires almost nothing from any of them. The hours pass. The sun moves across the sky. The flock grazes slowly across the hillside, and the shepherd moves with it, staying at the edges, never hurrying, just present. He knows these animals. He has worked with most of them for years and can recognize each one individually. He knows which ones are likely to stray, which ones follow the others reliably, which ones are stronger and which ones are weaker, and which ones need to be watched more carefully. This knowledge is in his body as much as in his mind, accumulated over years of close daily observation. He eats his midday meal sitting on the hillside, looking out over the landscape, the village in the valley below, the fields around it, the woods at the edges. The bread is the same bread as always. The cheese is the same cheese. He eats slowly and without hurry because the sheep are nearby and calm, and there is no reason to hurry. The dog lies at his feet, also resting, one ear still angled toward the flock. In the afternoon, clouds come in from the west, grey and soft, and the light on the hillside changes from the clear, bright quality of morning to a more diffused, gentler light that makes the grass look almost silver. A light rain begins, very soft, barely more than a mist, and the shepherd pulls his heavy wool cloak tighter and turns his face down into it and continues his slow attendance on the flock. The rain does not change anything about the work. The sheep graze in the rain the same way they graze in the sun. The shepherd watches them the same way. Toward evening, he begins to gather the flock. The dog helps with this, moving with practiced precision around the edges of the group, guiding them together without alarm, using position and presence to encourage the animals to move in the direction of home. The shepherd walks at the edge, adding his own presence to the dogs, and the flock moves together down the hillside in the particular shuffling, flowing way of a large group of sheep, their sounds rising as they move, the bar of individual animals and the collective murmur of the group. They come down through the valley, across the track that leads to the village, into the fold at the edge of the common land, where the flock is penned for the night. The shepherd counts them in, not necessarily in numbers but in his own way, noting each animal as it passes, checking that all are present, that none are limping, that all seem well. When the last sheep is in and the gate is closed, he stands for a moment outside the fold. listening to the sounds of the settling flock, the rustling and the low calls that gradually diminish as the animals find their places and begin to settle into the night. Then he walks home. The village is quiet in the evening light. The sounds of the day are fading. He is tired in the particular way of someone who has spent a day outdoors in all weathers, a tiredness that is in the skin as much as in the muscles, a weathered tiredness that goes deep. But it is a comfortable tiredness. It is the tiredness of work done in the way it has always been done, at the pace it has always been done, in the landscape where it has always been done. All of these people, the farmer and the night soil collector and the servant and the Roman domestic worker and the plague doctor and the fire tender and the shepherd, all of them moving through their days in the same steady, repetitive, unhurried way. All of them doing work that was necessary and unremarkable and largely invisible to the people around them. All of them going home at the end of the day and lying down and sleeping the way you are going to sleep tonight. There is something very calming about thinking of all that work, all those days, all those repetitive tasks performed by countless people across hundreds of years. The world kept running by the steady, undramatic labor of ordinary people doing ordinary things, day after day, season after season. You might feel right now a kind of pleasant heaviness, the weight of all those quiet days settling around you like something soft, the rhythm of all that repetitive work becoming a kind of rhythm in your own body, slow and steady and deeply, deeply familiar. The farmer is in his field, guiding the plough through the heavy clay, the furrow going down and coming back, down and back, down and back. The servant is moving through the quiet morning house, tending to the fires, carrying the water, doing the same things in the same order that they do every morning. The shepherd is sitting on the hillside, watching the flock graze across the wide, slow grass, the dog beside them, the sky above them, the hours passing gently, all of them in their places, all of them doing their work, all of them, at the end of the day, going home and lying down. Let your breathing slow down now, just a little, just naturally, not forced, not effortful, just the slow, natural settling of a body that is ready to rest. The night soil collector is driving his cart through the dark, sleeping city, the wheels turning slowly on the quiet streets, the city sleeping around him, everything still. The fire tender is making their last round of the castle hearths, each fire checked and settled for the night, each room growing quieter and warmer as the evening deepens. The Roman slave is in their small room at the back of the house, the day's work done, the lamps trimmed for the night, the house quiet around them. All of these lives, all of these days, all of this quiet, ordinary, repetitive work that kept the world going for centuries upon centuries, it is all very far away now, very long ago, very soft at the edges. You can let it all become very vague now. The fields and the streets and the castles and the hillsides all blurring gently together. The sounds of all that work fading into a single low, steady, comfortable sound, like the sound of the wind or the fire or the breathing of sleeping animals. You don't need to hold on to any of it. It can all drift away very gently, the way everything drifts away at the end of a long, quiet day, when the work is done and the fire is banked, and the house is still, and there is nothing left to do but rest. Let the images go, let the sounds go, let the whole long, slow history of ordinary work dissolve gently into the warm, comfortable darkness that is all around you. You have nothing to do tonight except breathe and rest, and let the darkness be soft. The farmer is sleeping, the shepherd is sleeping, the servant is sleeping, the fire tender is sleeping, and you are sleeping too, or very nearly, just at the edge of it, just feeling it come for you, quiet and warm and steady, like the rhythm of the plough, like the slow movement of the flock, like the flickering of the fire settling low for the night. Let it come. Just breathe, just rest, just sleep.